7 powers from the 5th dark dimension all dark chosen ones need. They don't tell you this in most spiritual circles, but not all power comes from light. In fact, some of the most advanced, most sacred, and most necessary spiritual abilities are born in places the average seeker avoids. We've all heard about love, light, ascension, gratitude, but what about the frequencies that come from beyond the veil of comfort? What about the powers that live in the 5th dark dimension where time bends, ego dissolves, and only those who have walked through their own deaths can enter? That's where the real initiations begin. That's where the dark chosen ones are summoned. Not because they are broken, but because they are built for what others fear. I'd been there. Not metaphorically, I mean spiritually, energetically, and psychically. I'd tasted the dense frequencies of that dimension. I've gone through initiations that stripped away everything I thought I was. And I came back not with answers, but with powers, 7 of them. Not gifts you read about in books. Not tricks to impress or manipulate, but cosmic tools of transformation that every dark chosen one must eventually claim, master, and embody. These powers don't come easy. They don't come quickly. They don't come without sacrifice. But once you have them, nothing and no one can unmake you.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first time I encountered the 5th dark dimension, I wasn't ready. I thought I was. I had meditated for years. I had fasted, prayed, studied ancient texts, and sat in silence longer than most people can sit with their own thoughts. But none of that prepared me for the depth I was about to witness. It wasn't just darkness, it was order within the chaos. It was intelligence, ancient and vast, that didn't speak in words but in frequency. It didn't care about my spiritual resume. It cared only about one thing. Are you willing to become nothing in order to become what I need you to be? That's the first initiation, the power of annihilation. Not destruction for fun, not chaos for the sake of rebellion, but the sacred act of allowing everything false within you to be burned away without resistance. This power teaches you how to die while living. It's the force that shatters your ego, your attachments, and your identity. And it's terrifying. But it's also liberating. Because once you've been annihilated by the 5th dark dimension, you are no longer manipulated by the human games. You're not here to fit in. You're here to reshape reality. You begin to realize that the 5th dark dimension is not evil. It's raw truth. It's where your soul goes to remember what it forgot when it incarnated here. And it doesn't give you anything you're not ready to handle. It tests you. It confronts you. It exposes you to yourself. And if you stay, if you don't run, when the shadows start whispering, you begin to unlock the second power, the power of shadow sight. You start seeing through people, through systems, through illusions. You don't just sense lies, you see them. You don't just understand pain, you feel its origin. This isn't psychic intuition, it's dimensional clarity. It's the ability to read the energetic blueprint behind every word, every action, every vibration. And it changes everything. Relationships become transparent. You stop engaging in surface-level healing. You stop pretending. Because once you've seen the mechanics of pain at the molecular level, you can no longer participate in emotional performance. You start speaking in codes. You start moving differently. And yes, people will feel it. Some will be drawn to you without knowing why. Others will avoid you like you're radioactive. That's how you know it's working. But here's where most people fail. They get addicted to the power. They mistake insight for superiority. They think they've unlocked something and forget the most sacred rule of the 5th dark dimension. You do not own the power. You become a vessel for it. That's when the third power is tested, the power of divine obedience. This one is rarely talked about because it's not sexy. It's not flashy. It's about surrender. Not to a person, not to a religion, but to the voice that lives inside the silence. The one that calls you to move when it doesn't make sense, to speak when it's dangerous, to stay when everything in you wants to run, to leave when everything in you wants to cling. Obedience at this level isn't passive. It's not about being submissive. It's about being aligned, knowing that the fifth dark dimension doesn't make suggestions, it issues instructions. And when you follow them, miracles happen, timelines shift, people heal, energetic contracts dissolve. But when you ignore them, everything falls apart. That's not punishment, it's recalibration. The dimension doesn't operate on morality. It operates on resonance. You either match the frequency or you get ejected. Simple. It's here that your body starts to change. Your nervous system becomes more sensitive. Your dreams become more vivid. You start waking up at 3:33 a.m. for no logical reason. You begin speaking things that later come true. That's when you're being prepared for the fourth power, the power of mirror distortion. You become a living mirror for others, not just reflecting who they are, but who they refuse to become. Your presence alone begins to trigger healing, resistance, anger, or awakening. You'll walk into rooms and people will suddenly feel exposed, not because you're trying to do anything, but because your field is now charged with dimensional truth. This is where loneliness kicks in, because once you carry the mirror, few want to stay close. You'll lose friends, lovers, communities, but you'll also gain something rare: clarity. You'll begin to attract those who are ready to evolve, not followers, not fans, but fellow warriors of the unseen. And together you'll begin to remember why you were sent here in the first place. So let me ask you something now, and I want you to sit with it in silence. What are you still clinging to that the fifth dark dimension has already asked you to release? What part of your identity is still resisting annihilation? Because until you let it burn, the powers cannot fully anchor. The frequency of fire, why your nervous system must be rewired to handle dimensional power. There's a brutal truth most people will never be ready to hear. The body must be broken before it can carry higher power. Not damaged in a way that leaves you destroyed, but broken in a way that cracks open your inner circuitry so it can be rebuilt, upgraded, and reconfigured to match the bandwidth of the dimensional forces you've been called to host. That's where the fire begins. Not as punishment, but as purification. The fire of the fifth dark dimension doesn't just burn illusions, it restructures your entire nervous system. Because you cannot hold divine power with a human pain threshold. You must evolve beyond your biology. When I say fire, I don't mean metaphorical passion. I mean literal energetic combustion that begins to pulse through your spine, your gut, your chest. It feels like anxiety, but it's not. It feels like panic, but it's not. It's activation. Your old nervous system, wired for survival, fear, and social approval, starts short-circuiting. Why? Because it was never built to carry the raw frequency of the fifth dark dimension. That dimension isn't filtered through logic or safety. It's pure signal. And when that signal enters a vessel that hasn't been cleansed, it causes chaos. This is why so many people crash after a spiritual breakthrough. They accessed a higher dimension, but their nervous system couldn't hold it. So they either numb it, run from it, or collapse under it. But the dark chosen ones, we don't collapse, we transmute. We let the fire do its work. We stop resisting the trembling, the shaking, the sudden emotional waves. We stop labeling the fire as trauma and start recognizing it as spiritual engineering. There's a moment, and you'll know it when it comes, when your body becomes the battleground between your past conditioning and your future capacity. You'll feel like you're dying. You're not. You're shedding. The old coding is being uprooted. Childhood programming, ancestral fear, karmic debris, it all starts to rise, not to punish you, but to be expelled. The fifth power from the fifth dark dimension is the power of nervous sovereignty. It's the ability to remain rooted and regulated while moving through multidimensional chaos. It's the capacity to hold fire in your chest without exploding, to witness timelines collapsing and still breathe, to feel the collective panic of humanity and still sit in your center. This power doesn't come from breathwork alone. It comes from integration. From learning how to let energy move without attaching to the story it tries to tell. From becoming the calm in the fire, not just outside of it. Your nervous system is the portal. The more regulated it becomes, the more power you can channel without distortion. That's why the fifth dark dimension tests you emotionally, physically, psychically. It's not trying to break you. It's trying to build your container. Imagine trying to pour a lightning bolt into a paper cup. That's what happens when people access divine power without preparing their vessel. They leak. They burn out. They become unstable. And worse, they start projecting their spiritual chaos onto others and calling it truth. That's not mastery. That's misalignment. True mastery means you can hold multiple realities at once. You can feel the pain of the collective and still speak life. You can sense the collapse of a system and still move with purpose. You can stand in the ruins and still remember the blueprint. That's what nervous sovereignty gives you, not perfection, not detachment, but capacity, the ability to hold more without becoming less. But let's be honest, this part of the initiation is not glamorous. It's not sexy. You're not levitating or seeing visions of angels. You're on the floor, crying, shaking, questioning everything. And that's exactly where the fire wants you. Because it's in those moments, the private, ugly, unshareable ones, that your new nervous system is being forged. You're being taught how to stay open while burning. That's the true sign of readiness. Not how enlightened you sound, but how much fire you can hold without running away from yourself. So let me ask you something only a few will understand. What if the anxiety you're feeling isn't a problem to fix, but a frequency you haven't yet mastered? What if your nervous system isn't betraying you, but awakening you? What would change if you trusted the fire instead of fighting it? Because here's the truth. Every time you let the fire move through you without fear, your frequency expands, your vessel strengthens, your access to dimensional power deepens, and you begin to embody the sixth power, the power of energetic command. But we'll get to that soon. For now, breathe. Let the fire stay. Let it teach you. Let it break what must be broken, because only through this purification can you become what the mission requires. The authority of frequency, how energetic command turns you into a walking force of reality disruption. When the fire finishes its work, when your nervous system no longer crumbles under the weight of dimensional energy, you begin to carry something that cannot be faked, mimicked, or manufactured. You begin to carry frequency authority. This is not about loudness, not about presence in a room or a stage. It's about the silent force that moves through you, the subtle field around your body that enters the space before you speak a word. And once you've embodied this, you are no longer just a participant in reality, you become a disruptor of it. Not through rebellion, but through resonance. Because frequency doesn't lie. And when your resonance is aligned with truth, everything built on illusion must start to collapse around you. This is the sixth power of the fifth dark dimension, energetic command. It means your very being starts to issue instructions to the field around you. You don't have to try to manifest. You don't have to beg the universe. You don't have to force change. You become the change. You embody such a refined frequency that anything out of alignment with it either shifts or shatters. People will feel it. You'll walk into a room and the air will thicken. Conversations will shift. Hidden truths will rise to the surface. Not because you spoke them, but because your frequency demanded truth without a single word. But this kind of authority is not something you can perform. It comes only after you've bled for it. After you've let your ego be shattered, your attachments burned, your nervous system rewired. It comes after you've chosen obedience over control, surrender over comfort. That's when the dimension begins to trust you. It begins to speak through you. You're no longer just channeling wisdom, you are becoming a living code, a walking signal. Your aura becomes a weapon, a prayer, and a prophecy all at once. That's why people react to you the way they do. It's not personal. It's energetic. You're realigning the frequency field without any logical explanation. You are a mirror to every soul's dissonance and a pathway to their next evolution. But here's where it gets even deeper. Energetic command does not mean control. It does not mean dominance. It means alignment. You don't use your power to manipulate outcomes, you use it to restore coherence. You're not bending reality to your will. You're returning reality to divine order. That's why the realm of the fifth dark dimension is so intense. It doesn't care about your plans, your goals, or your timelines. It cares only about truth. And when you carry the frequency of truth, you become a threat to every system built on lies. That's why dark chosen ones are often exiled, misunderstood, or villainized, because our presence alone challenges the foundation of the false. You'll begin to notice something strange. People will start confessing things to you, secrets they've never told anyone, not because you asked, but because your frequency vibrates at such a rate that it pulls hidden energy to the surface. You'll walk into rooms and people will feel relief or rage. You'll start to see what others miss. You'll feel the energies behind the smile. You'll know the truth behind the words. And you'll speak when the moment calls for it not to be heard, but to shift the field. That's energetic command. The ability to correct reality just by being fully embodied in your truth. But this power is also responsibility. Because once you carry it, you're no longer allowed to lie to yourself. You can no longer hide in spiritual bypass. You can't pretend not to know what you know. You become your own accountability, your own compass, your own judge and priest. This is the part where it gets lonely, because few walk this path. Few are willing to pay the cost of becoming a vessel of frequency. But if you've come this far, you already know that your life is not your own. You belong to the mission now. So let me ask you one more question. Are you willing to speak truth into a world that punishes truth-tellers? Are you willing to be the frequency that disrupts comfort, challenges illusion, and awakens the sleeping? Because that's what you're becoming. Not just a human, not just a seeker, but a signal, a living broadcast of dimensional order. You don't chase impact, you are impact. You don't push change, you are the change. That's what energetic command is. You no longer react, you radiate. The return to origin, why the final power is not mastery, but memory. There's a moment at the very end of the path where everything quiets. Not because the world stops spinning, but because you no longer need the noise. You've moved through the fire. You've shattered the illusions. You've endured the isolation, the tests, the stripping away of everything you once thought was you. And now, standing on the other side, the seventh and final power begins to emerge, not as something new, but as something ancient. Something that was always there, waiting beneath the rubble of your conditioning. The final power is not mastery, it's memory. The sacred remembering of who you were before the world told you who to be. This power doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't come with applause or visions of grandeur. It comes in a whisper, a stillness, a sudden knowing that you never needed to become anything, only to remember everything. You remember the codes you carried before you incarnated. You remember the reason you chose this timeline, this body, this assignment. You remember the mission. And with that remembrance comes a peace that cannot be stolen, a calm that doesn't waver, a knowing that doesn't need validation. This is the most powerful state a dark chosen one can reach, not because it makes you invincible, but because it makes you unshakably aligned. When you remember your origin, you stop chasing anything. You stop defending yourself. You stop explaining your path to people who were never meant to understand it. You just walk it, quietly, powerfully, authentically. You become the embodiment of the source from which you came. And in doing so, you start to activate others not through teachings or speeches, but through presence. Memory is the key that unlocks your full energetic lineage. You don't just remember who you are, you remember what you are. A multidimensional being encoded with frequencies that existed before this world had language for them. You start to reconnect with your galactic, ancestral and elemental roots. You remember the elders who dreamed you into existence. You remember the councils you sat on before you agreed to descend into density. You remember the pain of forgetting and the joy of finally coming home to yourself. This final power is also the most dangerous, not because it harms you, but because it erases the last veil between you and your full potential. There is no longer room for doubt, for delay, for denial. When you remember, you must act. You must embody. You must speak. Not because you want to, but because your soul can no longer contain the truth it now remembers. That's why so few reach this stage. Most stop at mastery. They become addicted to progress, to improvement, to power itself. But the true ones, the dark chosen ones, go one step further. They step through the fire of ego death and into the stillness of remembrance. From this place, you begin to move differently. You become the eye of the storm. You walk into chaos and it settles. You enter timelines and they shift. You don't need to force healing, it happens in your presence. You don't need to perform power, you are power. And yet you're humble, because you remember what it cost to get here. You remember the nights you thought you wouldn't make it. You remember the silence, the exile, the spiritual warfare. And you carry that memory like a crown, not to be worshipped, but to remind others that they can remember too. So now I ask you the final question. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to become and started remembering who you already are? What would shift if you stopped searching outward and simply turned inward into the dimension where every answer already lies? Because this is the culmination of the journey, not a climax but a return, not an ending but a beginning. You are no longer a seeker. You are no longer a student. You are a vessel of memory, a keeper of codes, a guardian of dimensional truth. You are a dark chosen one, and now you remember.